There. Thank you, Michelle. It's been wonderful working with you since we started this, and I'm really appreciative of your tech support today. Sometimes I can get very lost trying to keep my words and get my hands finding the right places. So I really appreciate your help. Welcome to the rest of you. I see some of you have done some land acknowledgements already as we gathered. And I am here in Cape Breton in the province of Nova Scotia and acknowledging today the wisdom of the traditional custodians of this place where I live, the Micmac people. Invite you to now that we can see each other, if you're in gallery, to kind of lean in and look at one another, acknowledging too that we're here to support, to nurture, and to steady one another in this time that we have together. And invite you just to take a few moments and be where your feet are. Really sense your feet on the floor. Really move your attention there. Be where your feet are. So often in this work of ours, we are where our head is, and that's not always where our feet are. So be where your feet are. Sense your feet on the ground and beneath whatever floor or carpet or mat underneath that. Sense the stability and the support of earth. Be where your feet are. And as we bring our attention to our feet, perhaps you'll feel some warmth or some tingling or some sense of aliveness in your feet, rising from the earth itself. And invite you to use your breath and draw that awareness up through your feet, through your legs, through your hips, through the pelvic bowl, up through your torso, through your throat, into our head, knowing that that stability, that foundation, that support of earth, the being of the divine is within us. I invite you now to make three conscious breaths. Glory to the Maker. Glory to the Lover. Glory to the Keeper. As a go, and in this breath, and will be ever. Amen. Well, the opportunity to gather today was to give a little bit of background to the to Longings, the small group study, and we'll kind of do four things, making our way through the hour that we have together. I'm going to begin with just a little bit of background information on what's called our three intelligences, or our three-centered awareness. And really, most of the work of Prayer Bench is written out of that kind of foundation. So it may be helpful for you to understand how I understand it, although I imagine it is similar to how you do as well. Then I'll give a little bit of background on the theme, how it came about in me. It is the resource that I didn't intend to write, that demanded to be written. And I'll give a little bit background how that happened. And then I'll get into a little bit of the elements that are in the study and why they're in there and why they're in the order I put them in there. And then briefly, a few other resources that there are to support the study and support your leading of the study. And then there's lots of time for any questions or comments. But actually, I invite questions as we go along too. Just either write them in the chat box or raise your hand, and hopefully, Michelle, you'd keep an eye on that for us as well. Thank you. So feel free to do that. Let me just talk a little tiny bit, and this is just a mere scratching the surface of what's sometimes called our three intelligences or three-centered awareness. And what I know about it is based mainly on the work of Cynthia Bourgeault, and from her, the wisdom work of Gurdjieff. So really, they are ways of knowing in the world. And one of those ways is very familiar to us, especially in the West, which is uh, knowing through the intellectual center. And the intellectual center is mainly concerned about how we weigh things. Is this better than this? How we compare things, um, how we evaluate things. So in many ways, it is the way that we learn how to do math. It's what the center that we're using when we're reading, except maybe reading the book that we just want to lose ourselves in, that might be bringing on board a different center. It's how we write, how we weigh things and articulate them. It's the way that we process data and logic. It's our reasoning. So that's the work of the intellectual center, and it is probably the dominant center for many of us in the West. It's the one we're probably most trained into using. But there are two other centers, and the second one is called the moving center. Now, if this is the thinking mind, the body is the body mind. They're both intellectual ways of knowing. But the moving center is intelligence that we gain through movement. It's learning that embeds itself in our bodies. So things like how we ride a bike, how we walk, how we sing. Sing is one of the greatest gifts of the moving center. How we knit. All those things that are intelligence in motion, which is another way of thinking about it. Perceiving the world is how we perceive the world, how we know the world through sensation and through gestures, through rhythm, through movement. And it may be the least used for some people. the least well-known intelligence, way of knowing, valued way of knowing um, in the West, used in a way that we're awake. Often it's used in a way that it's just mechanical, but learning the other than mechanical ways of the moving center gives us access to a whole other way of knowing. And then the last way is the emotional center, the heart mind. And that does include feelings and emotions, but we've kind of limited um, the knowing of the heart to feelings and emotions. And it's part of it, but there's much more involved in the emotional center and knowing through the emotional center than just feelings and emotions. It is really our way of knowing without words. It's how you know by looking at someone before they've even said a word, you know it's a bad day. It's that kind of knowing. It's how you know when you walk into a room or a meeting that there's tensions in here and they're flying back and forth between people. I can remember in my work, I often kind of was parachuted in to sit in a meeting, and it was both gift and curse when I walked through the door because I could literally, if you'd given me a pen and a piece of paper, I could trace the lines between people, knowing the tensions between this person and that person and this person and that person. And that always faded somehow. It's because it's not our dominant way of knowing, but it was always a gift and a curse at times of knowing. So it's the emotional center is how we know we're safe, and it's how we can sense we're not safe in the world. The word that science has for this is empathetic resonance. So our emotional center is the place where we have empathetic resonance with the world. The other word for it is entrainment, how two things um, come together and entrain in one another. It's really how we know truth. It's how we know beauty. It's how we know harmony. And of all the three centers, it moves the fastest. You'll arrive at knowing quickest through your emotional center, and you'll arrive at knowing the slowest through your intellectual center. So sometimes, and this may have some resonance for you, if we're engaged in discernment and we're getting nowhere, we're weighing this and we're weighing that and we're balancing this with that, and we can't seem to get a sense where we're going, we need then to bring in one of the other centers, the emotional center or the moving center, because our reliance on one center, on just the intellectual center, will never or will takes forever to get to a decision. So that's when going for a walk or giving ourselves some silence and space just to sit and know where our feet are, be where our feet are, the responses come much quickly. Does any of that make sense to you? Yeah. Okay. So it's not a matter of life balancing all three so that we have some intellectual, some moving center, but then we go for a walk, we come back and we have some quiet time. The conscious human being, according to the wisdom way of knowing, means that all three centers are charged at the same time. They're in harmony. Cynthia Bourgeot uses the image of they're online. All three centers are online at the same time and in communication with one another. And that's what gives us our strongest presence in the world. That's what gives us our deepest perceptions and way of knowing, is when all three are charged and in harmony, and that, of course, is our life's work. And we're awake, we're present, we're knowing, and we're loving God, and we're being that love in the world. So some of the wisdom teachers would say you can be the most intellectual person in the world, have all the knowing of the world, and you could still be asleep if we don't work at being this conscious human being. So why am I telling you all this? I'm telling you all this because even before I had language for it, even before I became a student in the wisdom tradition, prayer bench, small group studies, all the retreats, the pathways I write, they're all designed to support this three-centered awareness. They're all designed in certain ways to bring us into presence of mind, presence of heart, presence of body, presence of the all in all. And they're all designed with ways and practices to bring all these three ways of knowing into a flow. Sometimes I do it better in some than in other, but always the intention is there to ground the process, to ground the work, to ground the conversation in consciousness and in three-centered awareness. So when we get to the elements, that will be clearer to you why some of the things that are there, and why you may choose to use them. So the theme itself, longing. After I wrote this and got it out there among a few friends to have a look at it, one friend wrote back with a song, and we'll use it at the end, but it begins with the words, "There's a longing in our hearts, O Lord, for you to reveal yourself to us. There's a longing in our hearts for love we only find in you, our God." Beautiful, beautiful songs, beautiful words in this song. It's an Anne Quigley song, and we'll hear it for our closing. But it's my sense that we're living in a time when our longings really are amplified. That longing for love, a longing for mercy, a longing for courage, and I'm really hearing that since the election of our neighbors south of us, longing for courage, longing to stand firm, longing for comfort. What about you? If you use the chat or we're a small group and you're unmuted, just shout it out if you wish. What are some of the things you're longing for? Or as pastoral leaders, what are some of the longings that you're hearing in your work and among the people you are with? What are some of the things you're longing for?
I hear longing of faith, to really believe in the depths of faith.
A longing for faith and to really hear in the depths of faith. Yeah.
Along those lines, a longing for being able to trust and then act out of that trust.
Mm. That faithful action.
Longing for peace.
Longing for peace. And let me just get my chat box open here. Longing for justice. Yeah. And that longings become more amplified too as we look forward and face forward. Longing for meaning is prevalent in conversations, and a longing for hope. Hope matters. Hope really matters now. Peace and meaning. So that's where the theme is rooted. That that's why I wanted to write, why I couldn't not write this, although it didn't fit very well with my schedule this year. But longing is amplified right now. I feel it in myself. I feel it in nature. One of the gifts of where I live now is the property on which I live. And even there, I'm feeling that longing. In social media, where I sometimes spend too much time, but it's there, it's embedded there. I hear it from my friends. I'm hearing it in my work through Prayer Bench. And last May, it is that sense of longing, really, although I don't think I would have used the word at the time. It's the longing that brought me to a wisdom school that was held in Guelph in the Ignatius Jesuit Center with Cynthia Bourgeot. And it was called Holding the World. And as soon as I read the description, I thought, I'm never going to get to go to a wisdom school that's going to be closer than Guelph to me. That was the first thing. I want to go. And the second was, I want to help. When I heard about this wisdom school that was about holding the world, I thought I want to help. And so I did apply. I was able to go. It was so incredibly shattering in many ways. I wasn't nearly as wise as I thought I was, and perhaps a little wiser, wise enough to get myself there, though. It had some profound meaning for me, meaning that's still unraveling. But the place where it came together for me was during, I think it was the fourth day of school. The whole being of the place was slightly overwhelmed by our being together, by our work, by this work of living in three-centered awareness, which we're just simply not used to. And Cynthia called for silence for 3/4 of the day, just silence. And the director of the Ignatian Center offered to lead a 1-hour silent walk in what they call their old growth forest. It was very simple. It was very short, but it was one of those experiences of a lifetime where eternity is actually settles into an hour. And what he did is he led this group. First of all, we had to cross the road. So he had a singing bowl with him, and when we got to the road, he sounded it, and for 3 minutes we were just to stand there, just to be there in what I've come to call the place of the ordinary, traffic going back and forth. And that became for me a poignant reflection later as I, yes, thank you. There it is. That was the highway, the road that we were looking at. It became a very poignant reflection later of how we are so entangled with matter in this world. Matter matters, as George MacLeod of the Iona community said. The world is full of God, and part of having three-centered awareness is having the perception to be able to see that, to be here now, to be where our feet are, to know that how we see things actually affects what we see. So that's actually the first session in the longing study, is inspired by this very road that you're looking at, of how we are, how we place ourselves, how our being in the place of the ordinary. We then, after our 3 minutes of silence, got ourselves across the road. You can stay in the PowerPoint, Michelle, and the second one now. The second one, when we crossed the road and walked a little bit through this old growth forest, we came to this ruins, and you could see the shape of a building, and we learned later that it was an old um, mill where the forest of this place had been milled into boards, and it's ruined now. But you can see there's one corner. But the amazing thing is, in the midst of all this falling apart, um, the trees were starting to grow up alongside the ruins. So there's this wonderful image of holding this tension, this paradox between the ruins and this whole space where the mill was that tore into so much of this forest, now being reclaimed by the forest itself. And so that this created the second theme in the small group study that you have access to, that in the midst of the falling apart, there's always something new rising. And we can talk, as we do in the wisdom, in the wisdom tradition, that we may be getting to the end culturally of a particular way of knowing, a particular consciousness, and we have this opportunity now to bring a new consciousness, an integral consciousness into being. But that story, even if it's our cultural story, it's always been part of our faith story. There's always a falling apart, and there's always something new rising. And that's, of course, what Advent is always all about. It's this time of planetary crises, yes, but it's also still the time of birthing, the time of nativity. And so that's what Ruins and Reclamation is about in the second session. The third one, and you can bring us now into this last slide, Michelle, thank you. We kept walking through this old growth forest, and we came to this stream, and you can see that it's not a great picture of it, but if you click on it, it is a video, Michelle, I think. Yeah. So you see, there's actually two streams there. It's a confluence, the technical word for when two streams flow together and create one stream. And you can see that happening there in this confluence. And that, of course, is a wonderful incarnational image for us of the coming together of the divine and the human, the coming together of two streams, a confluence. And we are, of course, part of that incarnation. And I'm going to use a title here that's used by Stephen Charleston. You may know him. He's a Indigenous elder, the author of a few books now. He's also on Facebook daily with, after his morning prayers, he just writes 2 or 3 sentences. And he's Indigenous elder. He was the former bishop of Alaska in the Episcopal Church. But he talks about how we always hear about collateral damage. And he calls his followers to be part of collateral, what is it? Where's my phrase? Collateral renewal, collateral renewing. And now more than ever, we need to be part of this cosmic vision of making goodness and making justice in the world God loves. It comes with its own call. This is collateral renewal to stand firm, to find literally, not just imaginatively, but literal ways of activating hope, peace, joy, and love in the world through truth, through beauty, through harmony. We're actually creating packets of energy that are part of collateral renewal in the world. It's not just something, an image of cultivating the fruit of the Spirit. It's actually doing it, actually creating collateral renewal in the world. That is the theme of the third session in Advent. Now, there are only 3 sessions, and I've been asked why there are only 3. That's just practical. I spent the last 7 years up until I retired a year ago from pastoral ministry, and just that last week of Advent isn't the time for a small group study. So all of prayer benches now are, after that little touch of pastoral ministry myself, all of prayer benches now are 3 weeks long. So that's the theme. Any comments or questions before we move on? And I'll talk about a few of the elements. Okay. All right, the elements in it. The newest element in the small group studies is something that's called movement prayer or sound prayer. It follows immediately after the audio recordings with the 3 themes, in which I talk about the 3 things that we talked about: the place of the ordinary, ruins and reclamation, and confluence. That grew out of some of the experience in Wisdom School, where after we heard a theme addresses, which tend to be fairly dense and long, we were all sort of sent outside to do things like rake leaves or pull weeds. And at the end of that period, there was what was called observations. And we learned as we went through the Wisdom School that if we immediately after hearing the addresses moved into small groups in order to have discussion, we really are moving almost immediately to our head, to weighing. I liked it, or I didn't like it. This was good, that wasn't so good. Wonder what they meant by this. And we're losing our other 2 ways of knowing what we know at the end of that time of listening. So I always used to move, which we tend to. I always used to move in from the audio recordings into the prompts for discussion. But now there's this little gap in there for the movement prayers. It's not very long. It's at least a nod that before we move into conversation, before we begin to hear one another's stories and opinions, this is a chance just to pause and to ground and absorb in ourselves more of what we know after listening to what we heard. And I'll be really interested to hear from leaders any differences that makes in the conversations when we have opportunity to pause and hear with more of ourselves what we've learned and what we've absorbed. The prompts for conversation, let me just say a few words about them and what intentions I have behind them. Probably Barbara Brown Taylor sums it up for me in terms of its aim when she writes, "What if church invited people to come tell what they already know of God instead of to learn what they're supposed to believe? What if church invited people to come tell what they already know of God instead of to learn what they're supposed to believe?" And really, the questions that I've shaped in the small group studies are all evocative type questions to help us share what we already know of God with one another. Now, there are way more questions there than you'll ever have time for. So part of your own discernment, part of your own intuition as leaders, part of your own being grounded as leaders is to know in the moment what is the right question. That's one way you can do it. The other way you can do it is have all the questions printed for people. I think in the second session, they're already done for you on a handout sheet. And ask people which of those questions has resonance for you that you want to share something about. So those are two ways that you can do that, but you don't have time for all the questions. Having said that, it's often tempting to spend a lot of time in this section. I have designed them for an hour if you have 5 or 6 people. If you have more than that, more participants than that, then you may need to go to an hour and 15 minutes. But it's awful tempting sometimes to get stuck in the prompts for conversation. For one thing, as leaders, it's often how we gauge things are going really well. So if there's lots of energy and conversation, we're going to stay there because we think people are getting what they need, or we ourselves are drawn in and we enjoy the back and forth. And that's fine. That again is your decision in the moment. But I'll just flag this, that the next section is the group spiritual practice. And in 7 years of writing small group studies, I think that's probably what Prayer Bench is best known for in its studies. It is the feedback that I get the most, is that the places that have used and given time and intention to the group spiritual practice have seen participants share more deeply, tell stories to people that they've sat in the pews with for 25 years and never shared before, come to value their own spiritual experiences that they may or may not have ever talked about. And repeatedly, I get feedback that it is, in the end, the most important part of the study. So just offering you that. Also for me, the group spiritual practice is where we are most intentional about releasing energy into the universe, where the alchemy of our group efforts kind of play out with a lot of goodness and a lot of beauty. I don't offer the kind of regional licenses that now 7 of the regions have taken up this year, except that's the real reason I felt there was something in this study that can offer something for the good of the world by us all doing it together, by being part of it, that we can create goodness that the world needs, that we can create beauty and see it in one another, that we can create that fruit of the spirit that can be offered into the universe. Our longings really offered for goodness. So those are basically the parts. The other part, the gathering and the checkout, they have explanations in the guide that you can look at. But let's pause there, and we're going to just pause there for a second for any questions or comments.
Linda, I see you.
Janice, I wanted to ask, you said there's only 3 sessions, but do you start it during Advent, or do you start just like the last week of November before December 1st?
That's where most people are usually starting, is then, but it's really entirely up to you. And although it is an Advent study, it's adaptable. I mean, if with you have your own knowledge, your own background, you could actually do it after Christmas. It has incarnational themes, but we just need to remind people incarnation is not just Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
And it may be a difference or so in readings, but for the most part, actually, the first two readings are not strictly Advent readings, or the first and the third. So it's adaptable. But yes, most people with Prayer Bench that have been using them year over year start the last week, especially this year, like last year, where all the Sundays of Advent are in December.
Mhm, mhm.
So
Thank
that's up to you. There's no rule, there's no law. Any other comments or questions? Okay, so Wanda, I see you said licenses. Is that because I mentioned that's the region paid for the license that allows you to use it for free?
Mm.
And you could tell other people too. It's going really well in your regions, really well, actually. I'm going to give some credit to Michelle for that, for the way that it's got out there. But invite other people, even if they have their Advent plans, they're welcome to download it and hold on to it for other use. Michelle, can you take us now to the study webpage? I don't, some of you may have been there already, but I just wanted to show that to you. You have it's protected there. You will have to use your password, but once you're in, that's what you'll see. If you're having any trouble with the password, it is case sensitive and there are no spaces. Sometimes we just put them in without thinking sometimes, but if you have any issues, you can get in touch with me. So you could just scroll down the page a little bit. So another copy of your guide there, and there you have the audio recordings. And if you could point to the top right-hand corner where the download button is, I highly recommend you download them, even if you have internet in the place you're doing your study. I can't tell you how many emails I've gotten with help. I'm in the room. I can't get on the internet. Can you send me the recording? Download them. And test out your speakers beforehand. There are also scripts. What I've found over the years is most people, yep, you can keep down, there they are. Most people want the scripts. They're also in the books. They either want to take them home or they want to follow along, especially if there's any accessibility with hearing. People can follow along with the scripts. Underneath are the resources for each session. So I suggest singing at the beginning. There's all kinds of choices there. And of course, singing, remember, is one of the other ways of knowing by which we bring ourselves more fully online. Now you'll notice at the bottom that a portion of the sales from the resource that I have earned through the licenses or through the single sales on the website, I am donating back to the Old Growth Forest Project in the Ignatian Center. The interesting story is that we're walking through this forest and somebody said, is this really old growth? Because, they were fairly small trees. And the guy who was leading us, he said, it will be old growth in 500 years. It's a new project in which they are now seeding and planting, but it's their investment in hope. So they call it their old growth forest, and it will be in 500 years with their investments now. So it's a wonderful story in itself. If any of you are close to there, they do have some wonderful walks and trail systems that you could look at. So back here for use in your own congregations, there's a poster. You fill in your old details. There's words, the icon without words, brief descriptions. I really try when I write this. By the time I'm finished writing it, I know it inside and out, so I can write brief things and I can write long things and I can talk for an hour like I almost have. So I try to share that in the small group study so that leaders don't have to. And everything should be there for you so that you can put your time in putting what I've said and suggest into your own words so that you really are grounded in it, so that you can be where your feet are as the real leader of the sessions. I do, and I can't say there's enough value your feedback. I can't tell you how many things over the last 7 years have changed because leaders did take time to email me back and tell me what worked well for them, what didn't work so well, what was confusing. Sometimes they've had wonderful ideas for new themes that I can write about. And sometimes they've had wonderful new ideas for how I can do things better for those who are leading this on the ground. Okay, let me go back up to the top because I'm not sure if I put it there yet. I also say that keep your eye on that because it is kind of a community thing. Sometimes people do this on Zoom instead of in person, and they send me their slides, and I ask them if they can share. They always seem to be willing to share. And so I add things there, or somebody says, here's a song that really goes well. And so I add it to the list. So keep an eye on it because I do add things there as we go along. Can I get you to take us now or put in the chat, Michelle, the worship resource? After I had this out and gave to a few people to look at, someone wrote back and said, I'm not going to do this for a study, but can I use it? Can I have your permission to use it for the worship for 3 Sundays in Advent? And I'll do songs and readings the rest of the time. And I thought that was great, particularly in places that don't have full-time ministry now. So I did I thought, how could this work? So I did the first one based on the first session using the scripts. So that is available to you now in the chat box. It's also on the website in the shop where the study is for sale, and you can just download it with the course without buying the study because it's available. If you have questions about that, it's there, but that's another piece of this that may be useful to you or to others if you happen to be the one supervising somewhere else that doesn't have full-time ministry. Okay, I think that's about what I wanted to say. Let me open the space now again to you for any questions, comments, reactions, thoughts. And then we'll go to our closing song.
I'll ask, how do we get the password?
The password? Okay, when you downloaded your guide, on the first page is the link and the password. And I think in the email you should have got that information was in there too. You should have gotten an email when you filled out that little form.
Mm-hmm.
So there was 2 ways of getting it. Are you able to cut and paste that into the chat box, the link and the password? Any advice for leading the sessions via Zoom? I don't specifically. I know that since 2020, every single one of them has, and the people, thank you for that, Michelle, said that it's fairly adaptable in that what they were doing was sending out beforehand the scripts and so that people had them in their email, but then using the audio recordings can use on Zoom. Practically make sure you use that sync button if you're using videos or things like that when you go to share screen. That's it basically will lend itself very easily to Zoom. The harder thing I think on Zoom is using your own leader's intuition to know energy and drawing people into the conversations. That sometimes depends on the size of your group, whether small groups would work well for that. They sometimes do, and they sometimes don't. But I think keeping track of that and asking is the best strategy. It's harder to create space. Did I miss any other questions?
I'm not seeing any, Janice, right now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, please know that I remain a resource for you. My email is janice@prayerbench.ca, and it should be in the guide that you have access to. And if you have questions or comments or stories to tell me, I value that, and I do. That's it. Thank you. I do welcome that. Okay, Michelle, thank you. And once again, can you take us to this YouTube video of the song "There's a Longing in Our Hearts"? And invite you, if you want, to turn off your audio and sing along. I believe it's a lyric video. But even watching the words or singing the words, let us offer them for the good.
That
There is a longing in our hearts, O Lord, for you to is a longing in our hearts, O Lord, for you to reveal yourself to us. There is a longing in our hearts for love we only find in you, our God. Lord, save us, take pity, light in our darkness. We call you, we wait. Be near, hear our prayer, oh God. There is a longing in our hearts, oh Lord, for you to reveal yourself to us. There is a longing in our hearts for love we only find in you, our God.
Thank you. And one thing I forgot in the resources is that there is an Advent calendar online at Prayer Bench, and it follows the themes, plus because it goes to the 26th, it goes to the 4th place we were on that pilgrimage to Sounded Brook. So that calendar is there online when we get to don't you hate that? When we get to December 1st, it'll be there, and each of the days offers an Advent awakening that follows the themes, and you're welcome to share that with whoever you would like. Linda, you say thank you for your gift to us. Thank you for your gift. Thank you for sharing it. Thank you to your regions. It's your regions who have paid for a license that allows you to download it and use it, and I'm grateful for that. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Janice. Anybody have any questions before we wrap up? I think you all know what you need to do. Thanks.
Can we download videos from the website?
Say
The
that.
videos, they're audio recordings.
Okay.
Just audio.
Thanks again, Janice, for bringing this to us.
You're welcome.
Mm. Mhm.